Question number 1. The Englishman pictured in lines 1 through 8 is best described as which of the following? If you look at the choices, you may not know both words in each choice, but remember, if part of an answer is wrong, the whole thing is wrong. A. Is the Englishman scholarly and reclusive? You have the word instruct, that he instructs his family, so you might use that to think he's scholarly, but reclusive refers to wanting to be alone or withdrawn from society, and there's no indication of that. So A is not the answer. B. Is he pious and conscientious? Pious refers to being devoutly religious, and it mentions here that he sends his wife to church and that he worships like his fathers, so we can say that pious is a good word to describe him. Conscientious means wanting to do the right thing, wanting to do one's duty, and here we have him rising early, instructing his family in every rule, worshiping, making sure his son goes to school, teaching frugal virtues, so he is concerned with doing what he considers to be the right thing, so conscientious fits as well. B is a good answer. C. Well, you might consider him to be solemn from the description, particularly because he is a sober person. There's no indication that he's melancholy or sad, so C is not correct. D. Mirthful and carefree. Mirthful or full of laughter? There's nothing about that in this passage. Carefree? No, he has many cares, getting up early, making sure his servants are up, instructing his family, so this answer won't work. And finally, E. Certainly, there's no indication that he's hypocritical, which refers to saying one thing and doing another, and by the same token, he isn't false. So D is incorrect, which leads us back to B, pious and conscientious, which is the correct answer. Question number 2. The Englishman is described in lines 1 through 8, pictured chiefly in his role as what? A, the first choice is banker, and while gold is mentioned in the passage, it's the Englishman's own gold, and there isn't any other hint that he might be a banker. So choice A is incorrect. B, there's nothing to indicate that the Englishman is a poet in the first 8 lines. That comes later. So B is incorrect as well. A patriarch is the male head of a family or a father, and this certainly applies. The Englishman has a son and a wife, and he's acting as the leader of the family. So C is a good answer. D, a suitor. That's someone who is pursuing or courting a woman in the hopes of marrying her, and the Englishman is already married. E, a critic. There's no mention of the Englishman criticizing anything or judging the merit of anything, so E won't work either. And that leaves us with C, patriarch, which is the correct answer. Question number 3. The change referred to in line 9 is described as one from what to what. So here we have a shift in the poem at line 9. In the first 8 lines, we have the sober Englishman as a patriarch, and now we shift to poet. Well, in the beginning, a sober Englishman would be conscientiously performing his duties. Now, everyone has been seized by the poetic itch. In other words, everyone is into poetry these days. The poor and the rich, court people and country people. Sons, fathers, and grandfathers are writing poetry. Wives and daughters are reading it. So if we look at the first choice, A, this might seem tempting because definitely the first 8 lines indicate piousness. But notice that in line 14, the family still says grace or prayers at the table. So they're still thanking God for their food, just in keeping with their new love of poetry. They're singing their prayers now instead of just saying them. So they're still pious, not sinful, and A is incorrect. B, sincerity to hypocrisy. There is no shift to hypocrisy here. People are into poetry, sincerely into poetry. So this doesn't apply. B is incorrect. C, straightforwardness to irony. No, that doesn't make sense. Now, don't get confused here. Even though you might have picked up on the irony in the fact that the author, Alexander Pope, is using a poem to sort of teasingly make fun of poets, which is ironic, that interpretation is getting outside of the poem. And this question is about a specific line in the poem. Now, times are changed. We want to know what about the times have changed, and the times have not gone from straightforwardness to irony. So this answer is incorrect. D, freedom to restraint. No, this is really the opposite of the shift that we see. And that leaves us with E, seriousness to frivolity. This fits much better. You have a contrast here between the times when the serious, sober Englishman conscientiously performed his duties in the first 8 lines and the times that are described starting in line 9 when everyone is seized with an itch. So E is the best answer. The author of this poem is implying in this mocking way that poetry is frivolous, and so the times have changed from serious to frivolous. Question number 4. In line 11, the phrase "where the bays" is best taken to mean which of the following? If you don't know what the expression "where the bays" means, then you might have trouble with this question. We'll look at that in a minute, but first, let's just talk through it and see what we can do if we don't know the meaning. We can most likely eliminate C, exhaust the opposition, because there isn't an argument going on here, and no one seems to be opposed to anyone or anything. This part of the poem is talking about everyone being obsessed with all things poetry. So let's get rid of C. D, become more religious. This is very unlikely to be the meaning. It just doesn't fit. Everyone has been seized with the poetic itch, not the religious itch. E, become the object of ridicule. If you think about the fact that the author is poking a little fun at poetry and poets, you might think this is a possible answer. But within the context, no one else is having a negative experience, and becoming the object of ridicule would be negative. So that interpretation would, again, like with the irony interpretation earlier, be looking at the poem from the outside. So we can probably eliminate this too. That leaves us with A, claim renown as poets, and B, set the fashion. B, set the fashion. If bays are something to wear, maybe they'll be setting a fashion, but fashion and clothing doesn't seem to have much to do with the poetry craze that's going on. Okay, so maybe men and boys want to set the fashion in poetry. But if that's what it means, then A, claim renown or fame as poets, seems like a clearer way to say it. So without knowing what wear the bays means, we could end up with the right answer, which is A, claim renown as a poet. But it's good to know what things mean, and this question would be very easy to answer if you knew that wear the bays refers to the bay laurel leaf and is an expression that comes from the ancient Greek and Roman custom of crowning victors with a wreath made from these leaves. This crown was a symbol of honor and status, and it's also where we get the idea for poet laureate and the baccalaureate, which is a bachelor's degree. So if you know all that, then the answer claim renown will immediately jump out at you. Question number 5. The relationship between lines 1 through 8 and 9 through 14 is best described by which of the following? You already know from your work with questions 1 through 4 that there's a shift between lines 1 through 8 and 9 through 14. That shift you saw earlier is from seriousness to frivolity. You know that the first 8 lines are describing a time when the representative Englishman was conscientious and serious, and that line 9 starts describing a change in the times when everyone becomes obsessed with poetry. So if we look at the answers, we see immediately that A is wrong. We don't have a thesis in the first 8 lines. We have a description. B, yes, absolutely. We have a description of a time when things were serious and then a contrasting description of a more frivolous time. This is a perfect answer. Taking a quick look at the rest of the answers just to make sure there's nothing that might be confusing. C, no, we don't have a rule and an exception to it. D, we certainly don't have a question and an answer. And E, we don't have a narrative here. This isn't telling a story. So there's no good reason to second guess. The answer is clearly B, a description and a contrasting description.